Welcome back. Come on in, come on in. This is the episode I've been most excited and most intimidated to do. It's the Alice Cooper tribute video. And the reason it's been so intimidating is because the material is so personal to me. And I want to really take my time going through it, and as you can see from the time counter, I'm not in any rush to get through what I want to talk about today as well. I want to start opening up the idea of archetypes because that plays into the discussion as far as this. It's not a music review, but this is going to be a stream of consciousness style discussion, and we're going to look at some kind of deep material, possibly in ways you've not looked at before, and so kind of prepare your minds and your hearts for what we're about to do here. I've got myself as set up as I can. I got my fresh cup of coffee here. I got a cup of tea as backup. I got some freezer Christmas shortbread from my mommy I got on the weekend in case I feel myself getting weak. So if you want to run off to the kitchen and get yourself a beverage, just take your device with you and listen along with. Before we get started, I also wanted to give my shout out to Andy Edwards. We are still in the month of March here, 2025, as we're recording this video. And some really interesting conversations going on both on Andy's channel, and I saw another interview he did with a guy, Anonymous interview. I'll put the link, or I'll tag the channel in the description, as I usually do. As well, I'll hide an Easter egg as usual in these music videos. But yeah, I saw Andy. He gave a shout out to the Coop the other day on one of his videos, kind of in suggesting that. He was gonna, well, not suggesting, he was gonna do A to Z of twats in the music industry, and he said for A, well, naturally, Alice Cooper would be the first to come to mind. So, if that's the case, I mean, Andy, love you. If Alice Cooper rates on that list, well, sign me up for the twat fan club. Alice Cooper is a champ and a boss in my mind, and always will be. So anyways, let's kind of get into it here. I think I'll start by kind of touching on the subject of archetypes. Because Alice, to me, he represents several archetypes. And rather than give kind of a textbook definition, I'll give you my understanding of what an archetype is. And it's more or less a literary device that writers will use in developing a storyline and characters for their plot that follow certain patterns of human experience, human behavior. And I guess the best way to kind of illustrate, I'll give you an example. And it's a music example, and it also borrows from literature. But the band Led Zeppelin, we're all mostly familiar with it if you're a viewer of this channel. If you're Gen X or millennial or even boomers, you know, you're familiar with Page, Plant, Jones, and Bonham, and these different band members, they fit defined archetypes that I can identify anyway. For example, John Bonham, he's like the power behind the band. Like he's the character in the story that's like a rock, the warrior, just pure energy. If you've ever seen the film, The Song Remains the Same, you know his character or the image he's personifying is that driving, like literally driving a vehicle energy through his drum solo on Moby Dick. And you can compare that to a literary character in the Lord of the Rings. Now, I'm not a Lord of the Rings fan. I don't hold myself out as any expert, but I'm familiar with some of the themes and some of the characters. But it's like in that band that was on their quest for the ring, you have the character of Gimli. And Gimli was the rock that was dependable. He was embodying power, just brute strength and force. And so, I hope that's kind of clear enough to see. Whereas, say, Jimmy Page, he comes across as more of the wizard archetype. And you see that in fiction as well as, movies and whatnot. And literally in that film, The Song Remains the Same, he's portraying himself as the wizard. And that's kind of how he always came across in the context of that band anyway, is sort of this wizard as part of the troupe of band members creating what they created. And obviously in Lord of the Rings, his counterpart would be the Gandalf type, right? The one who has a grasp of secret powers, the one who's mystical in nature, the one who's mysterious and embodies all that. And then, of course, you've got the prince, the hero, the handsome one, the anointed one, the chosen one, the front man, Robert Plant. And again, lifting straight from the Song Remains the Same film. I mean, he's shown prancing about the countryside on a horse with the glorious locks flowing in the wind, and finds the princess and swinging a sword around, and just the typical archetypical prince, the King Arthur type, the lead in the story, the hero, the people that the person that draws your attention. Everyone's eyes is on this character. Likewise, in Lord of the Rings, it's Frodo, right? He's the one that we're here to see. But then you've got the last member, John Paul Jones, and the archetype I feel he fits into is the faithful companion. The one who stands by to the end, the one who really, without that character in place, the hero, the story would just be very empty without that supporting role. And in Lord of the Rings, you've got the counterpart to the John Paul Jones character, again exemplified in The Song Remains the Same, as being on this quest, administering some form of justice. I don't want to get too deep into the themes, but if you've seen the film, I mean, go back and have a look at the film. It's kind of interesting how they all chose to represent themselves. But in The Lord of the Rings, you've got the counterpart in Sam. Sam is in many people's opinion, the true hero of the story. Like, he keeps Frodo motivated and in check, and he's got his back the entire time, and he displays the character attributes that we want in our lives. And so the beautiful thing about archetypes is they're helping tell a story. And if you take away, well, not so much if you take away any one of those archetypes, the story falls apart. But in the context of Led Zeppelin specifically, if you had all princes or all wizards or all power dynamics or all, supporting role, something would be lost. It wouldn't be Led Zeppelin. Like, the mixing of these personalities actually creates the dynamic that people respond to and relate to when they hear the music coming through either their radio or their phonograph record or their electronic device through an earbud. And so as we go along, both on this channel, we'll talk more about archetypes and the importance, and but I just want to get you thinking about what, or give you a bit of a background of where I'm coming from, and then maybe stimulate you to think about what archetypes stir you in particular. So that brings us to Alice, and it's possibly a long time getting here. I actually, I'm a little jealous or lustful. I wish I had the long black hair of say a razor fist to be doing this. Instead, I'm kind of still rocking this homeless Karl Marx look here. Mind you, Marx, in all the pictures I've seen of him, he looked like he probably could have been close to living on the street at any given time. But it's not a knock against homeless people, but it is what it is. And so with Alice, the archetypes are there, and maybe I'll just throw out a couple of them to get you thinking about where we're going. He's the anti-hero. He's the one deserving punishment, but he finds redemption. And so throughout his career, throughout the music, there's something communicated that from an early age, I was able to connect with that in a very, I don't want to sound too hyperbolic, but in a profound way that I was able to make a connection with this person on the stage, this musical artist, in a way like few people I have in real life. And just kind of to give you a bit of background on myself, what I'm finding is I'm a very empathetic person, and so that I can relate to people in a very deep way. And kind of this realization is new, but the outworking of it has kind of been in operation throughout my whole life. I'll tell you what, the hair is totally not working for me. I'll make you a deal. In exchange for a like on this video, we'll do this. And I won't be distracted. You won't have to look at whatever's going on up here. All right. Yes, the archetypes, the connection to Alice. I came across Alice. I'm not even sure how, but I remember at what age I was. It was around 12, 13 years old. I had been a Kiss fan by that time. Like, I remember exactly how I discovered Kiss. And it wasn't really I discovered him, but a friend of mine in grade 7, he gave me the album, Hotter Than Hell. And I went home and played it over and over and over. And I thought, yeah, these freaks are pretty wild, It was something altogether novel to what I was used to. My parents listened to ABBA and Johnny Cash and, a lot of country and western and Boney M, like real, stuff typical to their generation. That was stuff I grew up with. I find I have a fondness for some of that music nowadays, but back then, it was kind of something I needed to rebel against. That music that my parents had playing, it almost represented the status quo to me. And if you've been watching this channel for any amount of time, you may have stumbled across the idea that we're all about shattering, destroying, annihilating the status quo here. So Alice, though, was different. I don't remember exactly how I found that music. I'm suspecting it might have been like in a movie, like part of the soundtrack. Maybe it was that Meatloaf epic docudrama thriller Roadie. I really honestly can't remember, but I do believe, again, my memory is not what it used to be. my mind is like a steel trap, but there's a little bit of surface rust appearing in spots. But I believe that School's Out, the hit single was kind of one that really hooked me early on. And so it was kind of discovering more and more of his music. Now, kind of going back in time some more to when I was, pre-teens, early teens, the place where we lived at the end of the street, and it was like an eighth of a mile to walk there. Like it was literally a 2-minute walk. There was a gas station, restaurant, tire shop, grocery store, and then on one wing of the building there was this flea market. Nowadays we call them thrift stores, but back then it was a legit flea market. All manner of used clothing, some antiques, but articles from all over that were secondhand, third hand, fourth hand, or worse. But they had this massive record music section along with books and magazines, and I would spend hours and hours in that place looking at all the stuff, whether it was toy cars and collectibles, or I'd come across used instruments, guitars and stuff like that there. But the records, to me, music is almost like I associate with a full sensory experience, because going into a place like that, you're handling, the cardboard of the covers of these records, you're flipping through them, the smell of old books and secondhand junk from, other people's estate sales and whatnot. Like it was visual. You're seeing all this artwork on the album covers, and then you run home when you find these treasured pieces of musical glory, and you put them on the turntable, and it just takes it to a deeper level. But it's like the whole experience. That's kind of what I associated music with. It was like this hunt for gold, like you were mining for gold. And this place had stacks and stacks and stacks of records, and most of my record collection was built out of that place. And so I did find a copy of Love It to Death in that store. I think I found $1 Billion Babies there at one time. It's kind of irrelevant, but as I was growing my music collection and growing my knowledge of Alice Cooper's catalog, I just fell in love with this Love It to Death album. And as you can see by the title of the video, some of you may recognize that is a line from one of the songs, Black Juju. And I took that quote from that song, "Everything I'm living for is all that I am." The next part of that is, "Liking it and loving it is all in the plan." And I put that as my high school yearbook quote in graduating class in grade 12 at my high school. If I have no idea where that thing is. If I could dig it up and try to put that as my thumbnail. I don't think that's happening though, but I'll try. I'll see if it's still around. But yeah, I had actually misattributed that to Alice Cooper. That quote was in there, "Everything I'm living," and then I put Alice Cooper. It wasn't until very recently I discovered it was actually Dennis Dunaway, the bassist, who gets full credit for that particular song. So misattribution. That one is belonging to you, Dennis. I apologize. Shout out to Dennis Dunaway too. I've seen some more recent videos on YouTube, and I just appreciate that guy more and more. I'll just talk about Dennis specifically for a couple of minutes. I think one of the things that I love about the Alice Cooper band, the original lineup, is that the bass lines come through so well. In so much music, my ear does not pick up the bass line. Either it's so hidden, like I would notice it if it was removed, but unless it's like Les Claypool Primus, where the bass is essentially the lead instrument, I'm not hearing that bass in a way that I can appreciate it well. But Dennis's bass lines and the arrangements, I don't know if he snuck into the studios after hours and turned up the mixes on the low end on his parts or what. But the bass line, the mixing, the performances, just excellent throughout those first several albums of the Alice Cooper group. And with all due respect, I guess, or to give justice to this treatment of Alice Cooper, I probably should do a second follow-up episode, because I'm mainly going to be covering the period up to, say, the album Trash. I'm not very familiar with some of his more modern stuff, his more recent stuff. And so, I'm going to be going back and looking at some of the stuff I missed or just had left off, just because I wasn't into popular music so much during the time he was making all this music. But the original Alice Cooper band had, I believe, 7 albums, from the originals. The original 2 with Frank Zappa, and then several with Warner Brothers. The big ones were Love It to Death, Killer, School's Out, $1 Billion Babies, and then Muscle of Love. And those were the albums that hooked me. I had made a comment in a previous video that, at the time of my birthing, back in 1971, we had, in that same year, we had so many crazy albums in rock and roll history. But specific to this kind of discussion, Love It to Death was released in the spring of that year, and then Killers was released within a month of my birthday. I had said as well, Led Zeppelin 4 was released in that time frame. Metal by Pink Floyd was released virtually on my birthday. And, I'm gonna I'm gonna meander around about here, but it's like you hear these interesting theories or ideas on the internet, how our biology, our DNA actually behaves or functions in a way like an antenna. And so it's fascinating to me. I'm not saying this is the truth of what I necessarily believe about it, but I'd like to think there's some truth to what I'm saying, or some value in what I'm offering. But just hearing those combinations of sounds and what was being put into the universe in my vicinity, which is, the North American continent at the time, it's like the very fibers of my being were resonating with these sounds. I was a huge fan of Led Zeppelin at one time. Led Zeppelin 4 was the album that introduced me to the rest of their catalog. And so I'm not attributing that phenomenon specifically as to why it's almost a deterministic view that I have to be an Alice Cooper fan because of that. But anyways, those first albums, not so much Pretties for You and Easy Action, but the ones I mentioned earlier, I don't know in those 5 albums if there's a bad track on any of them. Just musically, like, I challenge you to go back and listen to them. Like, you've got the radio hits, you've got some jazz-inspired stuff, you got some really hard rock, heavy metal derived material. You've got the album Killers, which I'm not going to come across as an expert and say this, this, and this, but people like John Lydon of the Sex Pistols has said there would be no Sex Pistols without the album Killers by Alice Cooper. So, I mean, their influence was there musically. It was something that I picked up on. It inspired me. And the closer I looked, the more I started uncovering these archetypes, most prominently captured through the character of Alice Cooper, who was the front man, Vincent Fournier, who became Alice. You know, at first it was a character, and I look at the background of all these guys. They were kind of middle class, living in Arizona, whether it was the Phoenix area or Scottsdale, I'm not entirely sure, but just a bunch of high school guys wanting to get together and have fun, and they learned how to play through Alice Cooper, and it's just been such a joy going back and looking at these old documentaries and interviews and things people have compiled, even just listening to the old tracks, seeing some old videos of performances, live performances. It just blows my mind what's available in the media world. That if you want to do some deep research on your favorite artists and musicians, we didn't have this stuff growing up. It almost makes me giddy to think that we have all this available at the tips of our fingers here. But in any case, without developing every archetype of the band members within the original Alice Cooper group, who was, you had Michael Bruce, Dennis Dunaway, who I've already mentioned, Neil Smith on drums, Glenn Buxton on guitar, and Vince Fournier, aka Alice, as the front man there. That combination was, the intention was to have fun. The intention was to throw a dagger through the heart of the status quo, because at the time of their emergence, the hippie culture was still either just peaking or just beginning to wane. And in Alice's own words, we stuck a dagger through that whole love scene. It's almost like there was an intentionality to go out of their way to piss as many people off as they could. And the phenomenon was that they'd book a show and get on stage, and the place would clear out in record time. And that didn't last for long, but Frank Zappa saw that and saw the potential to market this because of that response. That I guess in Zappa logic, you look at something like that and figure they must be doing something right. So he was willing to invest in them, and so they made a partnership with Frank Zappa, and that lasted for 2 albums, and then I guess Warner Brothers took over with the 3rd album, and then the career kind of launched from there. But I see that in their songwriting. I see that in the groove that's laid down. They are such a tight group. Something about the intentionality of what they're doing, it comes through in their recordings. And in my appreciation of their catalog, you almost have to differentiate the studio recordings from the live performances, because it's almost like 2 different bands. It's almost like there's no desire to recreate the studio version of some of these arrangements. The spectacle is what's important on the live shows, and that was another aspect of what drew me in to the Alice Cooper phenomenon. And so like we've got the character of Alice, who's developing this persona of the both the anti-hero and the villain, and he's committing crimes, but not against the public at large or an individual. It's almost like he's committing crimes against his own psyche, and he's crying out for justice. He needs to be punished. And so the on-stage act became, the execution night after night of the character of Alice Cooper, whether it was through hanging or decapitation with a guillotine or electrocution, all manner of punishments because of the evil deeds of this character. Now, as a young person growing up looking at this, very impressionable and very empathetic as well, I could look at that because, whether you like it or not, we're all guilty in that same sense that Alice is. We're all committing crimes against ourselves or our future selves, or things that we know go against fundamental justice. But there's we never get the justice that we crave. And the irony is the background of Vince Fournier specifically is he's a pastor's kid. Like his parents were part of a church that he grew up in, and it's not that he was rebelling against the church, but he was making a statement together with the bandmates that we need to show America, we need to show the youth some truth about themselves. And they did it through this onstage act and the depiction of the character and the dark themes that were developed. Some of the songs like the Ballad of Dwight Fry and Dead Babies and I Love, the songwriting is what's on the surface, but on so many different levels, you look at what's coming through, what you're perceiving out of that music, and it's profoundly deep. Like it's meant to disturb you, and disturb they did. And so there's kind of this duping that's going on, that they're all in on the gag that this isn't real. Alice is not this crazy psychopathic character. It's just the character he's playing. He's an actor playing this character. Well, that's all fine and good, but if you're familiar with the biography of Alice Cooper, you realize there was a descent into substance abuse that really began to take over the character. And so let's just reset here for a minute. I'm not used to talking very long. I don't have like long drawn out conversations with people generally. There was a couple of phone calls I had in the last week that were like an hour in length, and then I met with some friends on the weekend, and then at my mommy's place, and so too much talking, it kind of wears me out. But I think I deserve a cookie at this point. And so you have that archetype being developed. The criminal who needs justice. But at the same time, and kind of on a broader view, it's like we need that justice in our culture, in society. And so the Cooper band, they were making their statement. They were giving the youth something to captivate them, They were giving a theatrical display that was meant to shock you, that was meant to cause the parents to lose their mind when they heard of the antics, whether they were true or not. You know, and this kind of goes into the cultural influence of Alice Cooper. I mean, whether it was the publicity stunts or the marketing, like some of it is just madly brilliant. How they came across, how they lived their lives. I mean, it is rather profound. They did all the wrong things and got all the right results. In that the performance was meant to offend. It was meant to terrify, and people ate it up. I ate it up, and rightly so. And it kind of developed into this phenomenon. If you're familiar with the career of Alice, you know, he was everywhere. He was rubbing shoulders with the likes of, you know, George Burns and Sammy Davis Jr. I mean, Hollywood Squares. You know, he was everywhere, and you know, not just musically. Like he was a cultural icon, and I, you know, just going back to what I said a few minutes ago, I remember the cultural icon Alice. You know, with the blacked out eyes, the makeup, the hideous, you know, deranged psycho that we were supposed to understand was Alice Cooper before I'd ever heard the music. Likewise with Kiss, like I had seen the makeup, the Destroyer cover before I'd ever heard, you know, any of the music. So it's like some of these figures, they were icons in their own regard, and Alice Cooper became a brand, but it was a cultural phenomenon. And as much as a response from the kids, it's like the parents, everyone knew who Alice was. If you turned on the TV, you were going to find Alice Cooper eventually, whether even on the Muppet Show, for goodness sake. And so there's a uniqueness to what he's doing. Like there's a radio show that he's doing nowadays. There's a YouTube channel that he's got going. Like there's all there was the Alice Cooper dolls and the toys, and like it became so much more. There were probably jigsaw puzzles and the comics, the magazines, you know, the Marvel comics, it was everywhere. And it's not that that captivated me, other than as an observer to see what's going on. You know, this is resonating with the public in a way, and I believe that Alice was getting his point across. Not that I can speak on behalf of Alice, but just what I've gleaned in what I see through these different documentaries and presentations and my understanding of the music, I think I am vibing with where he's coming from. And so yeah, growing up through my early teens, I mean, it didn't help that I ran into a friend in high school. We became best friends. And in grade 10, we soon discovered our favorite bands were Kiss, Led Zeppelin, and Alice Cooper. And I think Alice Cooper was the king of all. I don't know if Doug might have a different perspective on that, but we both went nuts over that stuff, and we kind of fed into each other's growing identification with the artistry, the music, and he was very much more a musician, my friend. He was a wizard at the guitar. If he had an archetype, it would be the wizard. Whereas me, I'm more of that anti-hero. The one that's deserving of punishment, but you still cheer. Because at the shows, the audience is taking it in. You know, this guy with the long black hair and the glittering outfit and the straight jacket, he hasn't done anything wrong in our eyes. He's done nothing deserving of any kind of penalty. And so we're screaming for him to prevail. We're wanting the villain to be the hero. And that's kind of the gag. That's kind of the bait and switch. That's kind of the genius of what Alice Cooper is doing. Is he's getting you out of your comfort zone, introducing you to the darkest side of yourself and embracing it. And what I love about Alice is he respected the intelligence of the people that were coming to see him, in that he knew that they knew. This is a horror show. This is Friday the 13th live on stage, and that the message is not to take what you're seeing here and then go be a violent psychopath out in public. And we all get that. You know, for some reason the parents never got that. They figured we were all going to turn into serial killers or something, or who knows what. Or we were going to bite the heads off chickens and, you know, gross sacrifice, or who knows what. But guaranteed every parent hated him and every kid loved him for a reason. Like it was a presentation of something to overwhelm your senses and overwhelm your sensibilities in a way, to get you to open yourself up in a way and kind of receive almost a lesson in living from that. I don't know, like some of this needs more development. It's fascinating to me, but I guess here's where it gets more personal. And like I say, I'm very empathetic, and I find I'm tending to be able to express emotion more readily at this stage of my life. So just a trigger warning: if I get too emotional, I'm going to try to power through it, but I'm determined not to hit stop on this. But if it gets a little uncomfortable, just bear with me. But yeah, you know, now getting away from say the musicality, which I love. You go back, you look at School's Out. You've got the hit single, School's Out, but then you've got all these wonderful tracks in behind it. And somebody described it as you've got the hit single and seven B-sides. Well, all those B-sides, if you do a deep dive or a deep listening of some of those, School's Out is going to be one of your favorite albums. You know, whether it's the interpretation of some material from the West Side Story as a theatrical production, to some of these really heavy, beefy jazz-inspired cuts, like Blue Turk, Public Animal, just a hard driving storytelling. It is amazing. I mean, I'll pause here for a second too. Like one of the things I so appreciate about Alice and the band, they pulled this off quite well, collectively and individually, is their sense of humor. There was the trickster idea that we're gonna roll into town, set up our gear, and chase everybody out of the house. Have them running for the sidewalk, and like there's a trickster element to that, and eventually it kind of worked in their favor, so that people were running to get the best seat in the house over time. But just the humor, the self-referential stuff. Alice has said, by the time we had all the money and all the fame we wanted, we released the $1 Billion Babies album because we were laughing at ourselves. At that point we weren't making music; we were just enjoying the process. And self-referential humor. We were the $1 Billion Babies, and we had become something that needed to be mocked, and who could do it better than us? So they did that, and so I really appreciate that. But I mean, again, if you're watching this channel, you probably are familiar with Alice's material. If not, I encourage you to go check it out. But some of the songwriting, like in School's Out, I mean, brilliant. I call this brilliant. You may think this is the dumbest thing ever, but the line, I'm not going to try to sing a bunch. I'm going to try to keep the song quotes to a minimum, but the one bridge in there, we've got no class, and we've got no principles. We've got no innocence. We can't even think of a word that rhymes. I mean, as a kid, hearing that, like, that's... You just trolled all your audience. It's like we're part of the joke. We are the joke, and we're inviting you in. Like, I just loved that part of the way they expressed themselves. It was just so delightful to me, and it still is. And Alice, to this day, he's maintained that sense of humor. That's one of the things I appreciate in seeing videos back in the day. He had a sublime sense of humor, and it always came through, whether in the shows or in front of a camera being interviewed. The sense of humor is something that I connected with, and it's something that Andy Edwards has said. It's almost like the purest form of art in a way. Like there's a timing. There's slipping in that little bit of wisdom, the bit of irony, whether it's sardonic or sarcastic. But it's things that need to be heard, and sometimes the best way to deliver a message that's going to cut to the heart is to wrap it in this, fluffy, fun ball of humor. And so that's something that Alice has always had. I think the band members have always had. I remember seeing a tribute to Glenn Buxton. He's passed away several years ago. I think it was in mid-90s. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but the members of the band had gathered for his memorial service, and just the way they talked amongst each other and talked to the camera interviewing him, like you could see that humor was always part of who they were, just a bunch of buddies having fun. Contrast that with, say, Led Zeppelin. They were essentially four guys brought together for the purpose of making strong musical presentations, but they weren't necessarily buddies or friends, or it was a different dynamic. Whereas these guys, like, we live, eat, sleep together. They, at one point, they had purchased a house in Connecticut just to be their party express some creativity, have fun, lose their minds. Like as a 15-year-old, understanding the way they live, like I wanted to live like that. Not anymore. The reality is, or the harsh reality is that Glenn Buxton, he succumbed to the rock and roll lifestyle. He had whether it was liver or kidney problems, he had come close to losing his life during that era of the Billion Dollar Babies recordings and the subsequent tour, and so he died of complications due to success. You know, it's a sad story, and I kind of see that if I had tried to pursue some kind of career in music, that could have very well been me. Now, the main character, the star though, Alice, is the one that I'm most identified with. It's again, I see so much of myself through Alice's life experience, the struggles with alcohol addiction, alcoholism, the mental strain, the mental, I don't want to say mental illness, though he was admitted to a facility for the purpose of getting his head straight. Again, one of my favorite albums coming out of that, From the Inside. Those of you unfamiliar with that material that came out in his solo era, go back and listen to Alice Goes to Hell and From the Inside. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Welcome to My Nightmare, but it's like it was at that stage when you could see the toll was occurring in his life. And likewise, as a young adult in my mid-20s, I was going through some struggles. I had some things going on that needed to be fixed in my life. I had battles with alcohol. And I guess from a chronological standpoint, like I didn't grow up with Alice Cooper as his career unfolded. I was born in 71, but I didn't adopt or I wasn't able to identify with the music or the person of Alice Cooper until the 80s. So that was like a full decade behind. And so when I was going through my struggles, I had kind of seen the heights, but I wasn't very familiar with the lows of the Alice Cooper story. And so that's kind of stuff I've had to put together after the fact, now, where I saw even the Alice Cooper band, like the tragic end, the way the friendships and the relationship and the band and just the ability to form, it all broke down. Like these guys were on top of the world, and for whatever reason, were unable to manage that. And that's not a judgment. Like it's probably a common theme, the common story with that kind of success. And sometimes, it can be fatal, like whether it's a Keith Moon or, a Jim Morrison. Like these guys were all contemporary with Alice. They were all friends. And, to this day, I kind of think it's a miracle and both the grace of God and the kindness of God and a work of God that Alice is did not perish as a result of the things he's experienced, but rather has survived to live another day, to be redeemed, to to overcome those demons, to step out of that role as the anti-hero and become the hero. And so yeah, through high school, there was the comeback tour. I remember the Constrictor album coming out. I remember going to see the Nightmare Returns tour with Kane Roberts, and by that time the sound was a lot heavier. He had rebranded. It was being turned into a heavy metal act rather than what had come before. And some of those albums in that period before that kind of were labeled the blackout years, I'm not too familiar with, but I'm really interested in going back and seeing, what was going on during that kind of new wave period when Alice didn't even know what Alice was doing. He's up front with it. He came out of the rehab, mended the relationship with his wife and family, but there was a cocaine and crack addiction that followed. That what the alcohol didn't do, that almost did him in. And so whether it was Flush the Fashion or Dada or I had a copy of Special Forces, but it just didn't seem to resonate with me back in the day. I'm interested in going back and looking at some of the material that was coming out in that dark, extra dark period. What was the unfiltered, unbridled monster that was trying to speak through that music? What was being created at that time? What can I learn about myself and what this artist called Alice Cooper was going through at that time? So I'm not too familiar with some of that. The Whiskey and Lace album. I never had copies of those. But kind of in the last year, I've grown in interest in replenishing, restoring some of my music collection. So maybe I'll start on the hunt for some of the hard copies of some of these old things. Again, I say music to me is just as much a tactile activity as it is an auditory. So I like having the plastic tape cassette with the insert inside that you read through and all that stuff. That's part of the experience. So I'll be on the hunt for some of this old material. I had no idea, how I'm gonna come across that. I guess there's eBay and whatnot, but it's not stuff I'm gonna try to find on some of these streaming services. I imagine I could find enough that I need on YouTube just to familiarize myself. But again, I want that jewel CD case. I want that big cardboard gatefold album to stare at, to take it all in. But yeah, getting back to kind of the high school years, there was a real shift towards this heavy driving sound, and that is, to my understanding, the sound that has carried through to this day. So there was the Raise Your Fist and Yell album that came after that, and then Trash, and then I was getting to an age where I didn't have the time to sit around listening to records anymore. I was doing other things, and I was getting myself into my own alcohol addiction season of my life where just listening to music for the enjoyment of it was less of a priority. So I kind of didn't follow his career, but in doing research for this video, and I kind of understood this, like I knew that Alice has recaptured or reaffirmed or embraced his faith in God again as I guess he would call it, a born-again Christian. To those watching, I mean, that's a whole nother discussion. I don't know the theology of Alice Cooper, but I know the spirit behind what he's doing nowadays is to, I believe he's looking at this as a ministry. And again, there's a bit of a, con isn't the right word because he's not conning you. There's an ironic joke in there in that the darkness is going to be right in front of you, in full view. But if you stand back and listen to the words, there is that message of redemption and hope. There's something bigger going on. So we're at about an hour here. I think I'll start winding this down. Just, there's so much to say about this, and I barely touched on the archetypes in a way, but we're going to be talking more about that. But just being able to see my story not overlaid, but reflected in Alice's story. Like I never came within, say, an inch of my life, but I've experienced loss. I've experienced coming back and having hope when there is no hope. It's a glorious story, and I think the story is still unfolding. The timeless love that Alice and his wife had, have to this day. 40 years together. They met as a result of the Alice Cooper show. His career brought them together. And like one point that kind of brought it home for me is the other day I was watching some documentary on Alice. Again, I've been wanting to do this subject justice. And Alice kind of blurted out, it's like, yeah, that's the way it is when you're in show business. And kind of it clicked for me. It's like, yes, this is more than just music for the sake of music and artistry. I think from the beginning for Alice Cooper, this was always about show business. And I kind of alluded to the fact in a previous video, is like YouTube as a platform is inviting people in, casting a wide net, asking people to come in and be a part of creating a streaming experience for people where you're entering into a career in show business. I had said before, and where Bob Dylan had democratized music, by performing his poems in nightclubs and whatnot until you get discovered. YouTubers all over the place are taking advantage of the democratization of show business by the ability to have a device that captures you talking to the internet, and the ability to upload a video via an internet connection, internet service provider, or a data plan. And it's exciting, and I think there's more to be said there as far as analysis. I'm almost automatically skeptical, because from what I understand, YouTube has recently made it so that they're encouraging more YouTubers to get involved, and they're promoting small channels and helping small channels. It's almost like I don't trust, like I have trust issues. And it's sort of one of those things, if you want me to do something, I'm naturally going to tend to do the opposite. I mean, that's been my policy with government, and again, we're still giddy from the celebration that today is March 10th and Justin Trudeau is no longer Prime Minister. We're not going to get into politics, but it's sort of rule of thumb I have with politics and government is if the government is incentivizing you to do something, the right course of action is to do the exact opposite. Oh yeah, another nod to the humor of Alice Cooper, since we're there already. Uh, the Billion Dollar Babies album, and by the way, I mean, as far as spectacle, I know I'm all over the place here, but this is fun. I want to talk about this stuff because it is so much fun to talk about. But the show opener, Hello Hooray! I mean, it's epic. Go back and look at both live performances, and even if you've only got the greatest hits album by Alice Cooper, that song Hello Hooray! It's preparing you for your mind to get blown. But anyways, on that Billion Dollar Babies album is that song Elected. And, you know, I don't know about you, but if I was living in the States, you know, it was such an upbeat anthem at the time. And Alice's response was that at every presidential election, he puts his name on the ballot as running for president. I don't know if that's true. All I can say is if I was living in the States or if I was an American citizen, Alice, you would have had my vote every year. And from what I understand, again, somebody's going to have to confirm whether this is true, that to this day, he still runs as a candidate. Whether he gets on the ballot or not, I don't know. I really don't know. But believe me, we probably wouldn't be in the trouble we're in today if Alice Cooper were running things. Yeah, I mean, I've just grown in appreciation. You know, even at his darkest times. I mean, again, I'm jumping all over the place here. But some of you may have seen the I believe it's Tom Snyder on the Tomorrow Show, that interview during the Flush. No, not Flush. It was during the Special Forces tour, I believe, where Alice was virtually unrecognizable and looking very sick. But then they did a live performance, and he did Under My Wheels, and I forget the other tune. It's at the tip of my tongue. But he still had it. Like, all the chops were there. You know, there was a groove. You know, he surrounded himself with great musicians and great producers throughout the years. Like, he still was able to deliver. And as bad as it was to look at, it was like you couldn't look away, or I couldn't look away. And that's been the appeal. It's like you're watching, you know, the train wreck in slow motion, and you can't turn your head. It demands your attention. And that, I find that as a phenomenon, you know, whether it's intentional or not, you know, there's something going on there. And just me, like, I want to tap into that. Not that I need to be an influencer. It's just the dynamics, the human tendency to be attracted to that kind of thing, to something that draws your attention in such a way that captivates you. You're unable to look away. I find that fascinating. I find something going on. So that resonates with me. And again, we're all unique. If that DNA acting as an antenna concept is valid, I mean, your context, your circumstances, your time and place and manner of both your birth, life, and death, they're going to be different, you know, for all of us. You know, you've got different parents, you've got a different combination of attributes and preferences, and some of it's genetics, some of it's, you know, the nature versus nurture argument. You know, There's dichotomies. Some of them are false, but some of them are real. You know, it's not nature or nurture. It's both. I'm starting to feel my voice giving out, so we'll get a little bit of lubrication. A couple more minutes here. But there's something in me. I want to know. I find that stuff really cool, and Alice has been an impact on my life as an inspiration and a model, in that I can see myself reflected in his experience, and it gives context to my experience. So it's not like I'm trying to live vicariously through some rock star, because you know there's limits to the experience, but the archetypes are similar. The archetypes that operate within me, we're having different experiences from the archetypes that operate within Alice Cooper, but they can put us on the same path and end up at the same place. So yeah, I think that's it for now. I appreciate all those guys that helped make the Alice Cooper phenomenon what it is. The original band, Frank Zappa, Bob Rezrin is a producer, Bernie Taupin, all the musicians. Thank you. There was something in the groove you laid down that captured me, and I can't escape it. And so yeah, much love, much appreciation. If Alice himself were ever to come across this material, thank you from the bottom of my heart. If you're ever up for a game of golf, and I'm ever in the Scottsdale area, I'll see if maybe we can make some time together. But with that, I think we'll draw this one to a close. This is part one of the Alice Cooper tribute. I really do want to go back and look at some of the stuff that, going forward from my young adult days. I'm not familiar with any of that part of his catalog. And then there are, fill in the blanks. I was never familiar with Pretties for You or Easy Action. Though I understand, some of those early tracks really did influence what came later on. They were still learning how to be a band at that point. They were still learning how to play their instruments. And so I want to go back and do more Alice appreciation, and then come back for a part two, maybe in a year or 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 from now. If you're still here, hopefully we'll have a conversation about that. In the meantime, we'll do another music video soon. There's other artists I want to talk about. I did want to get this one out of the way. Not out of the way. I wanted to do this one and wanted to do it right. So till next time.